And we're live. Hello and welcome to another special episode of Hex Therapy Live with Maddie, ALLin, and BlazeMakesMusic. Welcome, everyone.
Hey guys, excited to be here. It's always fun doing these monthly catch-ups with Maddie. So excited to go through all the news.
Yeah, I think our little psychology perspectives on everything. I think it really is special content for people in the Hex community because people are waiting for their stakes to come out. Some of us are waiting 5,555 days, and it turns out that there might be a lot of entertainment and a lot of value along the way. And so I wanted to go ahead and run the intro, and then you and I can really start digging into our psychological perspectives. If that sounds good.
Love it. Let's do it, Maddie.
Cool. Okay, so there are a number of things here that I've prepared, I think, for our discussion, because I think the most convincing argument about the topic that we're going to, I think, cover is this idea that Richard is playing some sort of like high-level game, and we're all participants, and maybe we know it, maybe we don't. But so I had a special famous person to go ahead and kind of create an intro for us here. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. It's a 1-minute clip, all right?
Go ahead.
Richard, do you think the Matrix will allow you to release crypto code that is superior to that of Bitcoin and gives decentralized financial freedom to all? What? You already released it? Oh, we better stop gatekeeping. Congrats on 100,000 Twitter subs.
You did it.
Yeah. I know I talked about that before, so I went ahead and did it.
Yeah, that was a while ago. Agent Smith, I love it. I'm a huge fan of the Matrix. I will nerd out for the Matrix any day of the week. So I'm very happy to see this initiative from you.
That's right. Yeah, and of course, I think that there is maybe some things in common. I don't know, what kinds of things do you see in common between Hex and the Matrix, or some of the themes that are playing out in both?
I mean, I think Hex is the red pill. Like, Hex is your exit from the Matrix. That's the way that I look at it. Like, I'd say that Hex, like we've spoken about probably lots of times before, it's kind of like that door that opens up, that lets you see that all of the things that you perhaps took for granted as being like, gospel truth are not in fact the case. And so it's a way for you to exit the Matrix, on a financial level. It's certainly that exiting of the system, exiting of that thing that has kind of grown up over the last however long, thousands of years likely, of this financial system kind of forming around us. So that would be the way I look at it, as the red pill. What about you? How would you see Hex in relation to the Matrix?
Well, I think it's a narrative that really helps us kind of understand and kind of a metaphor as well, right? And so there's a lot of deeper meaning that can be derived from looking at kind of these different angles, right? So when it comes to these, just to zoom out even more, I think the narratives, they're used by lots of different cryptocurrencies. You know, Bitcoin has its proponents, Max Kaiser, he calls his Telegram group, I believe, the Orange Pill group, because Bitcoin is themed orange. Okay. And, you know, so,
yeah,
so
it's kind of creative, I suppose.
yeah, but does it really live up to being the decentralized thing that it was starting out intending to be, right? We have the white paper from Satoshi. We have the project. I'm going to call Bitcoin a project. The project was launched completely centralized, right? Satoshi was the first one to mine coins, mined 1 million, and then, you know, got Kleinman and Craig Wright and all these other guys involved. Eventually Richard Hurt, right?
People really, really don't like this fact either. I've noticed there's a lot of pushback to that fact of history, like particularly as I've been trying to onboard people who've maybe already been exposed to crypto, have been involved with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. The idea that it was actually a centralized launch and Satoshi had mined all of these coins, you know, had all of the coins essentially in the beginning. It's not something that people find easy to accept, and I notice that's a big trigger for people as you start to talk through like what's actually happened in the crypto space with them.
So I love that we're already on such an important point, because when I look at that and when I try to understand, like, you know, the different layers of complexity and the different truths kind of in that idea, what I really find is, so Bitcoin, nobody knew it was going to be valuable. And so that's part of kind of what made it not really matter whether it's decentralized or not at launch, right? And then once it proved that it worked and that digital money could be born, right? Then all of a sudden other cryptos could come along, and then they would have the problem of launching because the world already knew that technology existed. And so I just find that pretty interesting that there's this element of surprise. And I believe that we'll continue to see this. And this is a major prediction that I'm making, is that we'll continue to see surprises coming out from Richard and from really anything that drives innovation in crypto, because you really, otherwise it's a promise coin. You can't have it both ways. You can't know how good something is and have price discovery in a fair and decentralized way. You have one or the other, right?
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that thought that the element of surprise actually has to be baked into the design of the cryptocurrency itself, and any kind of launch plan that it's put in place. This surprise factor absolutely does have to be there, or the whole thing starts to kind of fall apart in a sense, really.
Yes.
Yeah, because there are all these expectations on it, and that in itself kind of blocks the actual growth of the cryptocurrency. So that's a really interesting point.
One of my favorite people in Bitcoin still is Robert Breedlove. Have you come across him?
I know the name. I've definitely heard Robert Breedlove, the name, but I actually don't think I've know any content or anything like that from him. He's
a beautiful and genius individual. He has a show. I mean, it's called the What Is Money Show, and he's had Michael Saylor on there, and he's so well versed in history and economics, and is so open-minded that he almost got kicked out of the Bitcoin community recently for considering another coin.
I'm not surprised. Like, I am completely unsurprised by that, given how a lot of the culture around Bitcoin is. Open-mindedness isn't necessarily the first thing that's valued there anymore.
Well, that's part of being a staker, right? In the larger sense of like just holding something, whether it's time locked or not. if you hold something, you're going to become tribal about it. But the thing that Breedlove says that I really like is that everything is information. And so if we look at, launching crypto as information, and that interacts with the free market, or as free of a market as can exist, in whether it's a centralized or decentralized, market maker and that sort of thing, we do kind of run into an information problem, right? When something's being launched, to know how good it is and how valuable it is maybe more dependent on how the social psychology of it works and how the adoption works and all these other things that we see in Hex. The thing that clued me into this idea of surprises being particularly helpful or being particularly successful was not just the different airdrops that occurred when Hex was, coming up over the past couple of years, but also a coin called Mimblewimble coin. Have we talked about this before?
You mentioned Mimblewimble to me. Yes, I don't exactly remember the project thing.
The dev team had kept a certain percentage of the coins for advertising and development, and they surprised, like the opposite of a rug pull. They donated all the coins to all the holders who hadn't moved their coins. So it's like, it's a little bit like Hex, where you're time locking.
Yeah.
So
I'm 100% on board with this idea. Yeah, I think the more I think about it now, the more I think through this as you're speaking. Yes, the element of surprise has been everything to Hex. The no promises aspect, the no expectation of work or profit from the work of others. Hidden within that is the element of surprise. That's kind of what that is. So I really like that.
Yeah, because I think that there are some things that cannot be achieved if there's full transparency. And then there are some things that if you don't have full transparency, there's no point in doing it. So, stopping double spends is something that we need full transparency on. And it's interesting because Mimblewimble coin uses the Mimblewimble protocol as a way to prove that there are not double spends without showing everybody's balances at the end of a transaction. And that's been a concern and kind of a problem for the privacy sector itself. But this element of surprise, I think, it's really important. And I see that in Hex. And I guess to rewind just a second, the reason why it was so important in Mimblewimble coin is because if they had told people that they were going to do an airdrop of the dev coins, surprise, you get a bonus, then the market would have corrected for that percentage of coins. And so it was only by surprising the market that it could successfully add more value in a way that didn't become asymmetric, right? If somebody knows that an airdrop is coming, then they can create 200 wallets like Motley, the investor, and I did back in the day for MetaMask and game the system, right? And then the distribution mechanism of making it decentralized and making it fair starts to fall apart. And so it goes back to an information problem, right? Where how do you get the information out in a way that's fair or even a meritocracy, right?
This is really, really cool. As you're speaking, I haven't had at all any time to flesh out this idea, but a thought that keeps coming up for me is that systems must evolve through the element of surprise in order to be successful. That's just like brimming in my mind at the moment, and I think I'll need a few minutes to be able to flesh out exactly why that's the case. But it does seem as though this ability to surprise, to do the unexpected, seems baked into game theory and successfully kind of winning out in a scenario. So give me a few minutes on that. Maybe we'll come back to it. But that's kind of just something that's like coming up for me at the moment.
Yeah, I wonder if that has anything to do with like the adversarial nature of free markets. Like that a bad actor could come along and you have an information asymmetry that they would exploit. I think is one thing where we have more security in numbers, knowing that people have similar access to information. But I think also, I think Richard, I think he wants to tell us things, and I think he wants us to figure out things. And so I'll present like a series of examples, data points, if you will, from memory of listening to Richard's streams. You know, whenever it comes up in our discussions, kind of as we go through, maybe what are some of the surprises that we could see coming in Hex. And that way, everybody who is taking time out of their day to watch the psychology stream, you know, they'll get all the best information first.
100%. I love it. Well, you know, I'm on board.
And nothing in this is investment advice. People have to do their own research. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a guy who's talking about free speech and game theory and what really the incentives are. And so when we talk about what is game theory, right, that is what allows Bitcoin to operate, because it, on a more general scale, it means a lot of things to a lot of different disciplines. I like to say that it's at the intersection of basically social psychology and economics and physics, because it really seeks to know with great certainty what the outcome of something will be, or with a high amount of probability based on the incentives and understanding what humans will do in a certain incentivized situation.
Absolutely.
And so in the example of Bitcoin, the incentive is we have miners who are stopping double spend transactions, and they are burning electricity. And that they have to burn so much electricity in order to be the one who gets to prove that there are no double spends and get rewarded for that in Bitcoin. They're spending so much electricity that their electricity bill is costing many, many thousands of dollars, in some cases millions of dollars. So in order for them to pay back that that investment and that stake that they've taken in the Bitcoin network, they want the Bitcoins that they're getting rewarded with to be worth something. And if they were allowing double spends, the system would easily pick up on that, and then it would probably make Bitcoin less valuable. And then the people who are doing all this work, they would lose all their efforts. And so we're kind of assuming that the miners are greedy enough to be honest.
Yes. And it also, I think, Bitcoin really, really demonstrates the limitations that can be exposed in a particular incentive structure as well, or a particular type of game theory. Because as we know, there are these, what would you call them, negative externalities when it comes to Bitcoin. And that is obviously the cost of electricity. And so you've got hidden incentive to, in fact, sell the Bitcoin once you've mined them in order to pay for your operation. So it really, really shows how important it is to really think through the repercussions of like each of your incentive structures, because often there are these like shadowy or hidden incentives within these systems that can often be their downfall, kind of, in a sense.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's grown so big, right? Exponentially, more and more power, more and more computing powers being needed in order to keep the system secure, that it becomes this security theater. It becomes a security racket, right? And that's what we see in a lot of systems, even going back hundreds or even thousands of years. You know, whoever controlled the ports in even ancient cultures and Middle Ages and stuff would be the ones deciding how much profit everybody gets, and would be rent seeking on top of that.
100%. Yes. And I mean, I think that's a big part of the story of history as well, is just systems masquerading as things that they are not, in fact. Sort of like you're saying with Bitcoin, it's a system masquerading as security, but that's not actually what it is. It's more of a racket at this point rather than a security structure.
A protection racket. Yeah.
A protection racket. Yeah.
And so because we have already seen in the real world other cryptocurrencies test out and prove that proof of stake works, which is, again, just, it's a little bit different rules that have been programmed in, when really Bitcoin is a form of proof of stake in terms of the power bill. However, you don't need to sell coins to have a proof of stake system. What you can do is you can have people just buy coins, right? Bitcoin could switch to proof of stake by having people put up their coins for sacrifice if they lie. Or even if they don't lie, if they allow a double spend to occur, right? Then they would get slashed. They would pay a penalty. And the people who would volunteer to do that might be the ones who have the most Bitcoin. And that would take care of the system in very much the same way, except it would not require coins to be sold, dumped on the market, in order to pay for the security that keeps getting more and more expensive, right? The cost of many computing centers that can stop double spends is a fraction of the cost of what it takes to run Bitcoin. And so it's not that all that computing power is needed to stop double spends. I mean, the blocks only happen every 10 minutes. And it becomes expensive to do transactions on these proof of work systems. And we know that they've become a protection racket and that they failed at their original goal, because we see the creator of Ethereum and his videos from the first couple of years saying nobody should ever pay more than 5 cents for a transaction, and we're paying $50 or $500 for a transaction.
Exactly. Insane amounts of money. Yeah, like I said, I've had people that have been trying to onboard over the last week, and it's near impossible to find a fee that is not going to completely eat into their initial investment that they're looking to put into Hex. Like literally everybody would probably have somewhere between 20 and 50% more Hex if it weren't for the Ethereum gas fees at the moment. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how much economic energy is being sucked out of Hex just purely because Ethereum has failed in its promise.
That's right. Yes, it can't keep its promises, and that's because of poor design. But I really don't like how they keep promising that they're going to fix it. And I have a solution. I have a solution that could fix fix Ethereum right now. In the next 10 minutes, Vitalik could, call up his mom in Canada or whatever and get his cold storage keys out of there, right? Because that's where he keeps them. And there's a weird story about how Shiba coin pumped because he couldn't access his keys, right? Yeah. To dump the price. But that is actually the solution. If he dumped the price of Ethereum, transactions would be affordable again.
That's
temporarily.
Exactly right.
Temporarily, because he would be freeing up, the scarce asset that's needed to pay the miners, right? And so that, and maybe that's what he'll do. I don't know. That would be a good surprise. If he's taking suggestions, that would be a pretty good way. Now, would that stick it to the miners or not? Because they would still, if the price of Ethereum was lower, they wouldn't be able to sell the coins for as much, and they would still be limited by the block size. So yeah, I think that's how you could put them out of business if you crash the price. But then that would hurt people.
It doesn't seem like an ideal way to crush the miners.
It was Dev Kyle who made that point with Eric Wall, which I know the community doesn't like talking about that interview because Eric is so frustrating with his doubts.
He made some statements that will go down in history for all the wrong reasons in that interview. There were some zingers in there. the hex is the stupidest idea ever?
Yeah.
And?
Well, he said that he had said that
like,
before. He admitted to saying it before that interview. And then he
Right.
corrected himself and said, maybe not the worst, right?
Okay, so it's the second worst. But either way, yeah, that's singed into my memory, and I know that there are many hexicans that will remember that statement.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And I still remember his interview with Richard and Malta I came across it around the time Hex was launching. I think it happened before that, but you know, I could see even Richard was trying to find ways to explain it to people in more and more complex ways, because really, in order to understand Hex, people want, I'm not going to say that they have to, but they want to understand what is money, what is Bitcoin, and then what is Hex. And then they get the freebie of like, what is a T-share in there, and it becomes information overload. It's I don't care how you cut it, right? It's like more than a lifetime of education like that people have gotten in school.
It's a lot, and that's why I actually am finding it somewhat difficult with some of the crypto onboards to provide that education in a way that won't be completely overwhelming, because there's just so many flaws. Like, I've got one particular friend, there's just so many flaws in the arguments that he's making against Hex. But in order for him to understand why those arguments are wrong, there's like 3 steps back in the crypto layer cake that you need to get to for him to be able to kind of switch his mindset around Hex. And so it's one of those things it's clearly going to be a process. That's cool. I'm happy with that, but it's true in that there is actually so much that Hex unlocks that if it's not something that you've been thinking about for a long period of time, getting all that information at once, yeah, it can create a lot of overwhelm, and as we know, obviously a lot of cognitive dissonance, and that can create a lot of blocks to learning and taking on new information. So getting that balance right is really, really important.
Yeah. And yeah, that's something I've been trying to hack, is how to explain it in a way that people can understand and can be more efficient for us, the people who have bought their freedom and want others to be able to do the same. And so, yeah, I think hopefully tonight there will be some big nuggets that come out of this that people will be able to use as exciting alpha, perhaps, or exciting speculation to justify investing in Hex. And so I'll tell you some of the approaches I've used recently that I've been experimenting with, and may or may not be helpful for different audiences. But so the number one thing right now in my elevator pitch is Hex is the number 3 cryptocurrency by market cap, and nobody's heard of it. There are only 65,000 people in Hex, and the price has already gone parabolic, just like Bitcoin did, without having adoption. It's still pre-viral, and so there's so much opportunity, and that's what makes me so sure about it, is it's showing us how well it's designed because of how early we still are and how certain we can be about it. So that's a pretty big indicator to me. I compare it to buying Bitcoin at $1. And, usually the topic comes up like, or I try to get it to come up like, how much does somebody want to invest, right? And then, because if it's really, whether they're ready or not, if we're going to have this discussion, then sometimes I want to lead it in a way where it can be the most productive. And I also want to allow the person to stop trying to understand Hex and to experience it. Because when people do practice the time locking function, for me, something happened. I felt something deep inside me that said, you're paying your future self, and that doesn't feel good, right now, but maybe it'll feel good someday. And I've also had the experience where I had a stake come out where my past self had no clue that this would be so valuable, and I'm thanking my past self. And so in order for people to have those experiences, I think they do need some guidance. And so for me, I usually talk people down from how much they want to put into it if I think that they're not going to put anything into it because they're thinking all or none, because they're thinking, you know, of a certain amount that they want to put in, and then they would have to, they don't really know that they're going to get information overload and that they're not going to make an investment, in my experience. Now, Kareem, he is the dream. He can sell it, and, you know, we're going to try to package that and, you know, distribute it to all people or something. I'm not sure, but he has great sales pitches. I've heard him in private onboarding people, and it's outstanding. My approach, though, because he really goes after more high net worth individuals, and I go after average and low income individuals, and I kind of go after. He does more of a personal approach, and I do more of the systems level thing.
Yeah.
Although I know that he has a lot of stuff up his sleeve, so I'm not.
He does.
You know,
he definitely does. Yeah, I've seen a couple of them. Yeah.
But so, you know, really with about $200, I mean, that can be life changing. We've already seen $180 account go over $2 million in Hex from the beginning until now. And so that's another thing that I guess I try to appeal to, is this idea that it doesn't take a whole lot. If somebody already has a certain amount of money in Hex, I usually say that's good. Now you can, you know, now you can learn for yourself, and then you can decide for yourself how much more you're going to put in. But it's a learning process, right? I guess. What other observations have you had about onboarding? Because I think it's the most important topic.
Literally, I think I received a message this week that encapsulated essentially every objection that there could be, almost. So I figured maybe we'll see how we go for time, but maybe after we take a little bit of a peek at these, this element of surprise that you've been waiting in front of us here for the last little while, we could take a little bit of a look at perhaps do a little bit of a blow by blow of some of the objections contained in this message, and it could be a pretty good learning experience, I think.
Oh, that sounds like a great outline. And I want to shout out here Hex19. Thank you for the $50 super chat, saying, watching from the beginning of the stream. Can't wait to learn more from you and Blaze. Thank you as always. Our pleasure. And
thanks, Hex19.
My programming partner here and good friend, Future Us, says, LOL, I tried to call you in the middle of the stream again. Duh. Hey, Blaze.
Hey, Future Us.
And then thank you to Mount Coiner for the $10 super chat. Rock on, Hexicans. I love all of you. Likewise. Thank you. And so, so let's get into what are some of the surprises or some of the things I'm looking at. The first thing I think for people to pay attention to and for people to realize is that, in my opinion, Richard wants us to unlock the Easter eggs that he has planned for us. So if people remember a long, long time ago, people used to ask Richard for Easter eggs about his observations on live, sex stuff, anything, right? Like crypto.
Yeah.
People love learning from Richard, of course. And he's so knowledgeable and has his own takes on things. And so, so I think that in the past, when people have specifically asked him for Easter eggs, he had stuff. And I've seen him, I think, do like 2, maybe 3 Easter eggs. But every time it seems like he said that he had more that he was holding back. So that's one data point.
Interesting.
In a recent stream that he did, he said, I'm sitting here waiting waiting for people to ask me the right questions.
Hey.
And so he's happy, it appears, to answer questions about Rolexes and how Hex is not a scam and all that kind of stuff, right? Which is important. But I think that if the community in the live streams is asking for Easter eggs, I think that we'll get something. Or if we're kind of asking leading questions to where we're showing that we know what he knows and we're asking about it, I think that that would also like cause him to release the information that we're looking for.
That's interesting. So like it's almost as if he wants us on the right track before actually giving any additional information. Like
we know
like he kind of wants us to have the knowledge or at least the ability to go down that road with him before he'll actually give out something specific. Like is it something like that?
Yeah, I think it's a game. I think it's like a video game because he played 10 years, or said that he was obsessed with playing video games for like 10 years straight, and that he played, an infinite amount of hours on on one or two games in particular. And that comment makes me think that maybe he has the type of mind that could create something that is much more than it appears, to create worlds inside of worlds, so to speak. And definitely the whole Easter egg thing just is what technologists love to do as a surprise, just because they can, just because you look back and you say, wow, I can't believe that they designed that in. I can't believe that Elon Musk made this car be able to dance, and it has disco lights under it or whatever it does, and it plays this weird song and it swings you around in just the right way to make you feel like you're dancing with it.
100%. I mean, I also, aside from him being an avid game player, I think he's also just a master of marketing as well. I think he really knows how to make something attractive to people, how to get it talked about, and how to make something viral. And I think when you've got an element of mystery like that, you're really creating something that's like literally remarkable, as in people will remember that because it came to them in such an interesting manner. There was this surprise, there was this lead up, and then there was this final reveal, and people remember that stuff, and then they go and tell their friends about it. Like, like you're saying, these interesting things in the Tesla car, or the particular Easter egg that might be in this one game. These things really get people talking, and I think he's extremely good at that kind of marketing psychology stuff as well, and the elements of virality. I think he really gets those at a really deep level. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if there was something like this going on, like you're suggesting, Maddie.
People like games. Games are popular. And especially if it's a real life game, how exciting is this? That we are realizing we are already on a quest for knowledge, for longer health spans, for better mental health, for making the world a better place, right? Like, and so what better way to motivate people than to make it into a game and to make it interesting, right?
Yeah.
And so originally, when I had kind of, because I had to come to a realization, and it's like, maybe there was an aha moment, and maybe there was just kind of a gradual understanding, and then it was like, wow, we need to talk about this. And and so, one person that I definitely want to shout out, I was going to say, at first I wasn't sure, like, should I share this with people, right? Because I was worried that it would adversely affect people's belief in the product, or that it would, create some market scares and that sort of thing. But Richard keeps hinting. He keeps hinting, and so I'm ready to talk about it.
I think we absolutely should talk about it. Yes.
So Silver the Antidote used to be the one he was the first, looking back now, who was really cataloging and doing a deep psychological analysis of Richard's tweets. And so I think for a while, Richard was kind of releasing information because Silver was explaining it in such interesting ways, right? Were you familiar with any of his observations several months ago?
I think that may have been either before my time or it just, it hasn't 100% come across my radar. I did see a lot of great content from Silver the Antidote, but I didn't see that specifically.
Yes. Well, and he had a number of videos, and I know that he, had switched over some of his content to paid content with the Patreon, and I know that the community had mixed feelings about charging for content and stuff, but I can't just speak highly enough of just how cool the associations that he was making were. Him reading in between the lines, connecting dots, showing the tweets and showing what happened next in Hex and saying, look, here's proof over and over again. Here's proof that Richard is speaking in code, that Richard wants us, I guess, to play a game. I didn't fully recognize it at the time. And so, so I think that that's another gem, to go back and look at, or for people to kind of investigate, right? Because I don't think that people have to spend all their time reading between the lines on what Richard has said, or that sort of thing. But I really think that there's something there, and I'll kind of back this up more and more here. So, are you familiar with if we can talk about it, kind of kind of not getting too deep into it. I know it can be a family program and everything, but there's significance for the number 14. Seems
yes, I am aware. Yeah.
So I think I haven't quite unpacked all of that, but so Richard, he had been asked about, revealing an Easter egg, and he said something about 14. He said that 14 is having to do with people's sexual health and, them unlocking their sexual well-being. And then this became kind of some odd comment that he had made, or something that, some people were thinking, oh, why is he talking about that? Or, this and that, right? So it seemed a little bit odd at the time, but anyway, Richard backed it up with facts and everything. He made some scientific and personal observations. And then what we saw is that when he was asking the community for what to name the project that would replace Ethereum, that would be a fork of Ethereum, that would take the entire system state with it, and I could go on and on about what we've learned this will be, and I think we will make some predictions about what Pulse Chain will be and how big it'll be. But just that, so there's the number 14, and then the name Pulse, right? And so I think that it is very interesting that it was almost exactly $14 billion that was sacrificed in the fundraising for Hex. But I want to take that a little bit further, because it's not just that somebody had $14 billion lying around to make a point, right? And I accurately predicted that the OA would sacrifice, and my guess was 10. If I was really thinking more deeply, I would have probably guessed 14, because 10 billion isn't that much different than 14 billion when we're talking about how many X's Bitcoin has done, Ethereum has done, Hex has done. I mean, in a 10,000 X, which is 100,000%, being off by 40% isn't that big of an error, right? So, so I think that there's really that was intentional. I think that, but then that gets me thinking on something much more deeply, which is, how is it that Richard could predict down to the day the price, or basically the top and the bottom of the Bitcoin market for so many years?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is a question.
Do you have any thoughts as to how he could be more accurate than chance alone?
Like aside from just the general his genius kind of thoughts, I don't know. I think Richard has many talents. I don't know how to explain that one exactly, but I'm guessing that you may have some insights here, Maddie.
He has admitted that he doesn't know when people will buy or sell with Hex, right? And with other things. Mm-hmm. And he won't give a price prediction on Hex directly because, right, because that could risk it becoming a security. Now, Hex is so far from being a security, so far from meeting any of the legs of the Howey test that, he's going above and beyond by not making a price prediction on Hex directly. But isn't it odd that he can predict down to the day for years and years and years in a row, down to the day where the top and the bottom of Bitcoin is? Now, how could he know the price of one thing like Bitcoin and Ethereum? How could he know that if he doesn't know who the seller is?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I have had that thought. Yes, I have had that thought.
So he is the one creating the tops and the bottoms.
Yes, I've
definitively
had that thought. Yeah.
Definitively, yeah. I believe.
Yeah.
because he launched Hex at the exact deepest part of the bear market. I mean, there's no question, right? Like, people, he said that he called the 20K Christmas or the whatever, like back all the way 2017 to now, 4 years, he's called all the tops and all the bottoms to the day, to the exact dollar amount. So this is not guesswork. This is not him, reading market signals. This is him knowing because he's the one selling and buying. He's creating the tops and the bottoms. Okay.
Look, it's definitely crossed my mind that he says things with such confidence because, like, he's literally just going to dump the price himself. But I mean, what do you think this means for the level of the number of Bitcoin that Richard actually possesses / possessed in the past?
I think that Richard has more crypto than anybody in the world.
Yeah.
In each single coin that he holds. Like, I think that he has more ETH than Vitalik. I wonder if he has more Bitcoin than Satoshi.
So how did he get so much Bitcoin and Ethereum?
Trading. By making tops and bottoms. By taking the money from people who buy tops and sell bottoms. By having the greatest amount of delayed gratification in the space.
But if you say he traded his way there, so you're saying he basically got there on talent. He just traded.
When you're the biggest fish, then you get to eat other whales.
100%, but that means he didn't start as the biggest fish.
Well, so if he had millions of dollars and he bought in at $30 down to $1, and he also mined BTC blocks for free, all he had to do was wait 8 or 10 years for everybody else to screw up and just be patient enough, and then to start controlling the market starting from 2017. When it started to hit the news cycles and stuff, and when people started trading because they became aware of it. I mean, it's understanding adoption curves and all the stuff that really Dev Kyle, I kind of misunderstood some of his contributions to the project. I knew that he worked on the the share rate and a lot of the game theory, but that's actually, he also worked on modeling adoption curves and stuff. I just stumbled upon, he has his own YouTube channel, and there are a bunch of videos from a year ago that I hadn't seen. So if people want to check that out, you can look for, I think it's Try Hex on YouTube. And so, but so once we are convinced by any of these hypotheses or theories or facts, right, any of these clues, once we are convinced that there's a game to be played, then things really get interesting, because now we can go back and we can listen to all the key content that got put out, to Richard's discussions in the first Hex conference, where he said that he didn't want Hex to do better than a 352x. Okay, let's look at that. So Hex's price was in between 1 and 2 cents on New Year's Eve, and then somebody, we think it was the God Whale, who came in and spiked it up just for fun.
Pumped it. Yeah.
So what would the price have been if he hadn't done that? Would it have been 1.4 cents instead of 2 cents, or would it have been some other magical number? I'm not sure. But I think that, especially with Richard now hinting that he is going to buy Hex, or that he can buy Hex, that he has the ability to do that, I think is an enormously strong factor, because we might all be playing a game where he's sharing the biggest bags of crypto in the world with people to create value. Sometimes when you do mergers and acquisitions, you buy a company and you can overpay by billions and billions and billions of dollars, because because you're printing money, because you're creating value. When Facebook buys Instagram and overpays, well, I don't know if they overpaid for that one, but I think with WhatsApp, they overpaid by billions and billions of dollars, and they were like, whatever, now it's on our balance sheet. Now we own something so valuable. And so it's this
I
weird.
Completely get that. Yeah. I'm a fan of this theory, Mariana. I'm enjoying this discussion. And now I'm kind of like re-examining some of like Richard's history as well.
Okay.
Well, yeah, read it.
Yeah, so thank you to Hex16 for the $55.55 super chat. You're already helping us pick up on clues with the 5555, and you're saying that you've been going through all of RH's early tweets and interviews from the start of December 2019, and you're catching on to exactly what I'm talking about. Interesting. Yeah, it's there. The clues are apparent once you know to look for them.
My version of having had this thought that you're talking about is that Richard may have been part of some collective or a group of individuals or group of companies or whatever, who collectively they know they own like a majority share of the Bitcoin or the Ethereum or what have you. And so he's just kind of, got additional connections as well. But I think it's even more interesting to think about it being literally just Richard. I think that would be the funniest thing in the world if that was the case. That single-handedly has been creating these tops and bottoms. That would be so funny.
Yeah, and I think that helps us understand how, the 14 billion was possible, because if he can control the price of Bitcoin and Ethereum, which controls the price of everything else because of the bonded liquidity pairs, right? And he can make the price of Hex go up because he thinks it should be, because he finds it to be valuable. He doesn't want to see cheap Hex anywhere. And so, the 12 billion or 13 billion of Hex from the origin address, right? That the price of that was based on the most recent trades. And so for Bitcoin or Ethereum or Hex, he can be deciding what the price is and paying, extra in order to facilitate that price, or spooking other people out of their positions. One thing that we're seeing right now in Hex, we saw Mitch Ray earlier this week go, he was losing his mind at how he wasn't losing his mind about the price. He could have, of course. He was losing his mind about how textbook the Hex price chart was. In so many, it was almost like somebody had gone through an advanced trading pattern book and had said, I'm going to make every single pattern here that's possible, especially the ones that people don't see in this particular order. And, so it's like, that's a signal, right? That's a Hex flex, right? When you can pump the price of your own coin because because you're not going to lose any value that way, because you're going to get more adoption, because you're going to reward the early stakeholders, because you're going to get people to buy back higher later on in a lot of cases, and you're going to shake out all the people who aren't completely time locked and allow this thing to do things that it otherwise may not be able to do. For a long time, I thought Richard maybe had used up all of his ETH doing it, doing this or that, but I really think he probably has more than ever of all of the coins.
I think that's completely possible, especially with like all of the mechanics that have been at play recently with sacrifice and so on and so forth. I think he is exactly like you're saying, wealthier than ever in the crypto world, and I think there's a lot more juice under the hood there for him to exert his influence over what's happening. I think that's definitely clear, and you can almost just see it, like you can almost just see it in his demeanor as well, like how much he's just enjoying stuff at the moment as well. Like it's I'm loving seeing him out and about and like just doing all this really fun stuff. Going on some travels, doing activities. There's just this calmness and like this, I know exactly what's going to happen here, like vibe that he's giving off through what he's doing at the moment. So I wouldn't be surprised by anything that you're saying.
What was the latest one that I saw? He was having such a good time with the
F1 cars. Yeah, I think that was like either today or yesterday.
So I hadn't thought of this before, but I'm wondering, like, what does the F1 key on the keyboard do? Is this a clue? It's
F1.
used for retrieving help. F1 is used for retrieving help on Windows. Okay, I'm not sure if there's anything there or not. But that's an example.
Have you ever found a code like that in a tweet? I know there was the 14 that you've spoken about. Is there anything else like that where you've noticed like a picture of something or him put a like particular word in a phrase and it kind of in retrospect looked like it had some sort of significance to it?
Yeah, so there's all the stuff that Silver the Antidote uncovered, right? And that was, I can't recall all of it because I'm still trying to wrap my head around all this and kind of process all the clues that I've maybe seen already. One thing that stands out is when he said, and I look more in live streams than on tweets, but I realized from Silver's work that it can be pretty much in either of these mediums where we're seeing Richard trying to signal code and trying to talk about things in ways that are helpful to people. One thing that he said once that I acted on was he said, it looks like somebody keeps buying up Hex at 0.0 or is at 0.3 of a cent. He said, I wonder if they're going to keep doing that. And so I take that as a signal. Oh, the price is 0.3 of a cent right now. I should buy some, right? And so I bought some there that I wouldn't have otherwise because it seems like I could take a hint.
Yeah, there are many hints. This is true.
For this $10 super chat, thank you for that. And the deal of moving the Pulse tokens within 30 days, that applies to the free tokens you get for holding ETH at the snapshot. So we don't yet know the final rules for that. if you bought, sorry, you don't buy it. If you sacrifice and hope to get a Pulse airdrop, then those coins will not be taken if you don't move them. So, and the Ethereum amount of Pulse that you get is 1/10,000th of the value, I think, of the ETH or of the number of tokens or something like that, right? And so, so it's probably an insignificant amount. Like all of Vitalik's coins that are worth multiple billions of dollars, I think would only come down to like $20 worth of Pulse that he would have to move if he wanted to keep. So it's really, I think, negligible. But the final rules haven't been created. I know that I'm part of the secret game theory chat that helps pitch Richard ideas about that kind of stuff and makes observations about what's worked in the past. And I can't even keep up with all that because there's thousands of messages in there, and some of it's over my head. But I think that's the rundown there. So
amazing. Yeah, Richard's definitely a wizard. I think that's obvious. And like you're saying, it may just be that we're all playing a video game with him and not 100% aware of it. Like that he's actually just kind of creating it, and not like Hex is like the substrate of the game, but it's not the game in its totality. There's all these other things that are going on. He's like just kind of creating this almost like this crypto virtual space, and we're on this mission with him without 100% being consciously aware of it. I also happen to believe that, tell me what you think about this, that Richard may in fact be like a master of hypnosis. I think that there's some interesting ways in which he communicates, and there's some interesting ways in which he can plant, I believe, like certain environmental triggers that cause people to think of certain concepts. So like the obvious one is like actually Hex itself, and finding hexagons in nature or on the soles of shoes or whatever it might be. I think that's very deliberate, being able to actually see those reminders in the environment. So I think that's one aspect of it. But like, yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on hypnosis in general. I find it a very interesting field of study because there does seem to be many and varied ways to implant thoughts and ideas in people's subconscious without them necessarily having a conscious awareness of this happening. And I think that there are elements of Richard's communication which bear the hallmarks of this. I think this gives him quite an extraordinary handle on just like the power of influence.
yes.
Yeah. So just yeah.
So if people look up delayed gratification and the different, marshmallow experiment and the different topics that Hex is kind of drawing from, you'll see that there have been studies showing that like 15 years is a magical cutoff or something for these type of tasks. So I think that's an interesting data point. To speak to your observation about the hypnosis element and about the environmental triggers, I think that's really important. We know that the spinning Rolexes creates kind of a hypnotic vibe, right? And people I've seen have joked in the chat that that's what he's doing with the watches. Well, now, of course, I have my theory of what the watches stand for, which is more than one thing. My theory is that it stands for monetizing time. Mm-hmm. It peer pressures people to buy expensive things that won't go up as much as Hex to, like, again, shake out weekends and to teach people the value of delaying gratification instead of getting a watch. So he's kind of almost trolling there. But so if getting a Rolex brings you some, magical fulfillment and great joy in life, then, people, of course, can decide how much they want to delay gratification and how much they want to live in the moment and live for now.
Yeah.
But the third function is, and I'm pretty confident in this, that it's something that the haters can go after that Richard himself actually doesn't care that much about. And so he pretends that he cares so much about his luxury brand and his spending money, having $1 million worth of watches. But this creates a shield so that people don't go after the other things that he actually does care about, like making the world a better place, like, giving people financial freedom, the mental health benefits of Hex and of delaying gratification. If there's lower hanging fruit than that, and the haters actually think that he does care about the watches, then they'll go after him for that. They'll say, you're shallow, your Rolexes suck. I can't believe you think that that's going to attract people to your channel. People can really say much more horrible things than that, I think, about the watches, and that won't go through his armor, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like a way of like bringing out the hate, like, and so it might
channeling
be
it,
like,
yeah,
like channeling it, but also kind of like sorting it, because I think like it's kind of interesting, because if that's going to sort of be eliciting that response in somebody, then cool, you don't need to buy X, fine by us, like, you know what I mean?
exactly.
So yeah, like, I mean, I definitely think these strategies that he employs are very much multi-pronged. He's clearly had a lot of, training and experience in like influence and persuasion and sort of high-level communication techniques as well, high-level influence techniques. And yeah, I see it come out in a variety of ways. Like, I mean, even the idea that you're talking about of having the watches on his streaming set, and the idea that represents, monetizing time. It's like a classic kind of like hypnotic suggestion. To have that kind of filtering sort of past or going past the conscious filters, and just have that idea be presented to somebody in a more subtle way is pretty. It's very high level. Most people are not thinking that way. I would not be thinking that way. I would not think to, symbolically represent the behavior that I'm trying to get somebody to engage in on my stream set. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's very impressive.
and so maybe I wouldn't be surprised if we go back someday and we see like the days that Richard presented the Rolexes, if there's some pattern in the Bitcoin chart, if he doesn't end up with 14 Rolexes or something, and if the price of Hex isn't $14. So I think now my end of year prediction from when Wales Only and Kareem and I started Quanking, that was 33 and a half weeks ago. Our prediction was $10.01 for end of year, which sounded crazy because the price was 0.7 of a cent, right?
Yeah.
But now I am totally correcting this, and my new call, because I was off by 40%, right? With the origin address, I am now calling for $14 Hex. Now, our very own future us did one of these random line charts where it's based on the math of log fractals and this and that, right? And he showed me today that the chart is pointing for exactly $14 Hex by the end of the year. Now, any tiny variation in the price, right, it could cause a significant variation, that many hours away, right? But what we're seeing from Mitch Ray saying that the chart is so unbelievably textbook patterned that it's impossible. Basically, was his affect. That was his kind of reaction.
Yeah.
Although I don't think that he said that. It's we need to consider, right, that there are signals, and that this is going to be a semi-predictable game. That there might be ways to play this.
Yeah. Look, definitely based on our discussion today, I would not be surprised if it were $14 at the end of the year. Now, I guess there seems to be some sort of relationship between what Richard himself is causing to occur and what he is causing people to focus on, so that they take actions towards that outcome occurring, if that makes sense. So I think there's some sort of interplay between what Richard's directly doing with influencing the price, and what he's doing with influencing people's behavior towards certain goals.
Yes. I think Hex is designed to condition us to delay gratification, to more naturally, to be rewarded, to start off with people who have a varied ability to delay gratification, and to make everybody better at that, because that's a productive use of money. Richard always wanted to build healthy things into Bitcoin mining, and the community refused. The Bitcoin community. He wanted to solve medical problems with that computational power, and they said, nope, we're going to keep solving random puzzles instead of puzzles that would make the world a better place. Wouldn't it be interesting if Richard created a different version of Bitcoin, or a different version of digital money, in which we are the miners and we are the ones that solve medical problems and that make the world a better place with our computational power, with our prefrontal cortices, and our cooperation and our great riches that we will have, and we'll have plenty of time to plan out and to be further influenced by forces in the community that are seem to be good actors, acting in the right interests.
For sure, and it's all part of this wider game. These things are kind of baked into the game theory of Hex, because I did notice that you put up a poll on YouTube or Twitter, I can't remember, where you were asking the Hexicans would be prepared to assist others with the gains they have created in Hex, or something along those lines. And yes. I don't know if you have the full results there, but let's take a look. Let's take a look.
Go ahead and finish your thought.
I was going to say, when I put in my answer, I noticed that it was a very high proportion of Hexicans who are willing to help others. I think it was it might have been at 85% when I put my answer in.
Are you, so the question 4 days ago was, are you willing to help others with some of your mad gains from Hex? Please like and comment, and Hex flex wisely, my friends. 592 of you have answered this question so far. I'm going to drop the link so people can answer it here in the live stream and in the replay. Hit the like and subscribe button. And wow, here we're seeing 81% of people say yes, and only 19% of people say don't know / want to see results.
Yeah, definitely. And so, I mean, to me, this is just indicative that the system itself leads to certain outcomes with behavior, on the whole. On the whole, either the people who have gotten involved in Hex are sort of uniquely altruistic or uniquely helpful in dispositions, or there's something about the system itself that leads people to want to help others. And so it does seem to me that this outcome is also baked into the game design of Hex itself.
Yes, operating from abundance, I think might be one of the ingredients. Being in an abundant environment versus a scarce environment causes people to be more cooperative and to stop being so adversarial, to stop being so competitive with each other, and being more competitive against, like, you know, the elements and the other, you know, problems in the world. Oh, look at this. There's 666 votes on this one. And it says, this is from 4 weeks ago, if you're making mad gains in Hex, are you more motivated to engage with the Hex community or less motivated? 91% of people said that they're more motivated to engage. And so we see really you know, a huge percentage of people, I think, and maybe the less motivated will become more motivated. I believe that Hex causes people to have a higher amount of motivation once they get the extra 15 IQ points that come along with retiring early and healthy and not having to worry about the daily struggle. But then, you know, then our minds kind of have to adjust to that as well.
Yeah. But like, I mean, some of these metrics, like if you wanted to create a system or a product or a collection of people who were capable of bringing positive change into the world, I mean, these are the types of metrics that you want to see, that people are on the whole willing to help others, on the whole tend to become, you know, stronger and more closely knit and more engaged as they become more wealthy, so that this system kind of feeds on itself and it strengthens itself, and in a kind of flywheel fashion, it gets actually stronger with the more wealth that people accumulate. This is a machine for changing the world, and it's right there in the code.
Yes, it certainly is. And then these random numbers pop up and get 666 votes. But so we don't read into everything, right? That's not significant, right? There's no, Richard did not create extra YouTube accounts, I don't think, to you know, to land that number, you know. But there are, I think when we look at the price and when we look at his predictions and when we look at, you know, that really does it for me. That really helps me understand really what's going on here at a deeper level that he can't necessarily say. He says he doesn't want to spook the markets, right? Another thing he did was he launched Hex. On the day he launched Hex, he went on a show that exposes scams. And so he used marketing techniques that would repel most people, like appealing to insane price targets, even though there was a case to be made for 10,000x in 2.5 years, right? You know, it sounded outrageous at the time to the majority of people. And the people who listened and got rich were the people who cared about Richard because he was promoting health messages such as quit smoking, quit drinking, quit gambling, and quit playing video games obsessively. These are things that he used to build a following on YouTube before unveiling Hex. And many people in the community, they were around before he started talking about Hex, and their lives were changed. So it didn't matter how scammy Hex sounded to them because they already believed in Richard. And then, you know, even now we see a lot of people are wanting to get into Hex, but a lot of people still aren't. And so I think that still he's using marketing and targeting to kind of filter out what type of people will become the new whales of the world. And I was talking last night on Hex Therapy about how I think, you know, squids are going to be billionaires.
Absolutely.
Because one thing I've noticed is that, and this is something I wanted to expose as well, every time there was a big whale staking short in Hex, the origin address seemed to do an equal stake right before or after, and in some cases, a stake before and a stake after that stake. And so it was like signaling to that person, I'm not only watching you, like I'm letting you know who's boss. I'm telling you not to dump the price. And so I won't be surprised if the original architect of this system has come up with a strategy to where, because the technology is possible for the origin address, whatever, original architect, to monitor the addresses of all the OGs, because it's all on the blockchain. So you can see where all the hex is. Mm-hmm. And you know which hex belongs to the origin address. Like if you are the origin address, you know which hex is yours and which hex isn't. And then what you can do is every time an OG person sells, you can pump the price. You can buy their coins and then you can pump the price, right? And without ever even selling a coin, you can mess with people's heads. You could teach them a lesson. And you could show them that right after you sell, the price can be going up 5 or 10%. It's so much so that the math isn't hard, that you're already regretting. And I experienced this recently because I sold a tiny little bit of Hex, and then the price, it seemed like the price reacted immediately. And I've gotten that impression over time that even selling, $1,000 or $5,000 worth of Hex, starts almost triggering a system level correction upwards. And then I started wondering, even if there wasn't a bot stalking all of our trades and teaching us to delay gratification, maybe it's just an emergent property of the system itself that I've released my control over that Hex, and now I can't push the price down anymore. I have one chance, and it's almost like, so we're not getting paid to hold the price up. Like we're doing our best to hold the price down when the price wants to go higher, because either we can time lock, or we can be paying this inflation rate, or we can be, sweating having these insane riches.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about, hey. And I think what I love about Hex as well is, even if that wasn't happening, say there weren't any bots or a system-wide trigger that occurs, or some sort of surveillance of the OG wallets, the scarcity alone and the number of people trying to buy Hex versus the amount that's available can create all these conditions where the price just keeps going up. You try to sell it, but it just keeps going up because there's someone who wants to buy it. And pure and simple, there's just more people entering the system than leaving at all times. It's more, the number of people purchasing is always higher than the number of people selling on any given day. It might not necessarily always be greater in terms of dollar value, absolutely, but even if you look at yesterday, I think it was there was a couple of thousand people who bought, and there was 400 people who sold, or something like that. I'm not quoting precise statistics, but there was a big discrepancy between buyers and sellers in numbers of wallets doing it. So the liquidity situation is set up so brilliantly that it basically has to almost look like a rebound, even if there was nothing else going on here. That's just what would happen, just because of the dynamics of how the network is functioning, how the liquidity functions as well.
If you sell your Hex and somebody buys it who will never sell, that's a really different situation than selling in any other market that I know of.
100%.
So that's it's pretty wild to think about. And I'll go ahead and just emphasize that we do know I think that the origin address stalked big whales who were doing short stakes, because that's part of the 3 arrows. Again, the report that Silver did for free for the community. And, you know, now I'm thinking more and more, I want to shell out to subscribe to his paid group and find out, you know, whether it's $100 a month or something. I want to find out everything he knows, just because, you know, people play that for an Xbox subscription, or, you know, it's, you know, seems like there's a lot of value there.
Yeah. It, like, with those things, it's always like all right, should I spend that $100 on just buying more Hex? Good
point.
It's a tough question, but look, I agree. I think that you know, Silver obviously does a lot of very in-depth work. I've seen a lot of his content. Like, for me, as I was like entering Hex, Silver's content was, yeah, you know, one of the big reasons that I really started to understand Hex. And you know, I know he's always got really interesting tidbits of information, like that asymmetrical kind of information. And so, you know, it could definitely be worth being in there to gather some of that information for yourself.
Totally. And so it's just so wild to think about, you know, that we might be messing around with something that we still don't know how good it is, right? Because it's coming into fruition, and that it's kind of playing out. I mean, another thought that I've had is that, you know, based on the amount of value that the origin address or the original architect could have, you know, it might be able to basically, through an automated market maker, or just kind of through a macro liquidity, you know, situation, could kind of really know where the price is going to go, or have kind of a mathematical proof, right? Because if people are selling, and if you can wait to buy, if you can even out the natural demand and smooth everything upwards, then again, it's kind of like you're doing a merger and an acquisition of a company. You're kind of creating the value there, because you can almost guarantee that people are going to buy it at a higher price, because you're going to keep buying it at a higher price and make it more scarce, right? Like, so what I'm saying is, if Richard has $14 billion to pump Hex, then that's going to go a lot further than just raising the market cap 14 billion, because right, because it all comes down to how much Hex can be put on the market to sell once. And what we see, somebody had a tweet. Let's look at this. I saved a tweet here from somebody who had shown month by month how the amount of Hex in the liquidity pool is dropping.
That's a good. While you're looking for that, I just wanted to shout out to Kareem, and he'll love this. Just to let you know, one of the onboards that I brought on yesterday or the day before, with Kareem's help setting up staker apps and wallets and all this sort of stuff, straight into a 5555, because I was able to give her some education about how little Hex is available, how few T-shares there are, and that the best thing that you could do is maximize those T-shares. And pleased to report, straight in there. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, awesome. Well done, both of you. Very well. Well, all three of you, I should say. Here we've got something from a Hexican named Storyteller on Twitter, Storyteller_17, who says, I don't think people realize how rare Hex becomes, and shows the 1st of May, there were 247 million Hex in the liquidity pools. 1st of June, 153. 1st of July, 138. 1st of August, 98 million Hex. 1st of September, 71 million Hex. And on the 4th of September, it had been bought down all the way to 60 million Hex. And so something massive is coming. And this is a heat chart showing that Hex was the only thing up out of all these other coins.
Absolutely crazy. So when was the first date in that list? So if you can go back up, Maddie.
Yep. May. 1st of May.
So May to September. That's how many months is that? June,
4.
July, August. Like 4 months. We've got a quarter of the supply, basically.
It's moving in a function of a square, maybe.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it, is just cratering how much Hex is available. There is none available. There's only one
Totally.
way. Like,
yeah.
That's nuts. I actually didn't realize it was that fast. Like I've been looking at it over the last like month or two, and I definitely was like, okay, this is dropping. Like, obviously with sacrifice as well, that made a big difference. But 247 million in May to 60 million in September. That is ridiculous. Ridiculous.
And even in just the past week and a half, we saw the price double. Okay, that's another one. All right, here's one. This is gonna be easy, people. So, how many times has the Hex price doubled so far, according to Richard?
12.
Just did its 13th.
13.
At like 46, 47, 48 cents, somewhere in there. Now, 13, right? That doesn't seem like a very significant number in Hex.
But 14.
14. There we go.
That from you today, Maddie.
Okay, and that is what price of Hex approximately? If we double from 48 or 47.
It's getting close to $1, but you're at like 92 cents.
$1 Hex. So you have the significance when you reach 96 cents of the 14th double, which means a lot to people in Hex and Pulse. Mm-hmm. That may be the day that Pulse gets released. Surprise, surprise. Mm-hmm. On the day that Hex reaches its 14th double.
Doubling.
And then we still have the big news of dollar parity to come immediately after that. So Hex reaches the parity with the dollar, which is one of the biggest events that happened in Bitcoin, was when one Bitcoin was worth $1. And it's going to blow past that. It's pre-viral hitting $1. Bitcoin, it went from $1 to $30, I think, on the Wired article that caused Richard to start paying attention to it. So he helped make the $30 top. He made that top too. Richard made the $30 top. He's been making tops since $30, right? So
this is great, man. I mean, the 14 doublings thing before $1, like, as Karim would say, you can't make this shit up, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So 14, right? That's our 14. Magic carpet ride number, it looks like.
I'm gonna be looking out for 14s a lot more now that I've learnt this fact from you.
So that would have required planning in terms of the 33rd day of Hex being, that was the market low. That was the all-time low for Hex, was on the 33rd day that it existed. Also part of the 369 theme. And it required the exact price that it got down to, right, in order for the plan to come to fruition, to get right about 14 doublings from that before hitting $1. As you're hitting $1. So crazy. And that's what you can do when you make a market. And that's what you can do when you sell cheap Hex only to people who believe in making the world and themselves a better version. And then you get to see what happens as people slowly figure out what the real value of Hex is. If there is if the richest man in the world is Richard, and he wants to spend all of his money on Hex, then what's the fair value of Hex? What do you think the price is going to do before it goes viral, right? Before it swallows up all the value in the world, before it becomes $1 million Hex. Richard has said that he's scared to tell people that each Hex could be worth $1 million someday.
I mean, this whole thing is a no-brainer. Like, potentially the richest person in the world, you know, if this whole sort of Bitcoin theory pans out, likes Hex, invented Hex. I think it's pretty clear. It's a pretty big no-brainer what your average person should be doing right now. You should be buying Hex. Like, there's no question about that.
I mean, even if the fees are super high. So I like to tell this story because I think it's helpful for new people who are deciding maybe that they wouldn't get in to Hex because of the high fees. When I bought my first Ethereum, I paid $20 and $7.50 went to Coinbase for the fee. So I paid like a 40% fee for my first Ethereum. If I had said, oh, that's too high, then I would have missed out on buying, $13 or $20 Ethereum. And, now it's worth $3,000 or $4,000. So.
Yeah, no, it's like, this is amazing. And like the Hex chart is ridiculously beautiful. I mean, Richard's not just making a market, he's making a market with style. Like, he's making a market beautifully. You know what I mean? So you can just sit back and admire it for just for that fact alone, that it just looks so pretty when you look at this chart. And but yeah, like I was saying, I think it's a no-brainer of a situation.
It looks too good to be true, right? And at the same time, it's following in the footsteps of Bitcoin almost perfectly. Whales only observed in the past week or two that at the same number of days from when Bitcoin launched, so when Bitcoin was 650 days old and Hex was 650 or so days old, they were both at 40 cents. Is that a coincidence?
It's not, Matty. I think there are very few coincidences now. I mean, I think it's also quite clear that like Richard really loves numbers. Like, he really sees some power in numbers, like in the way that he, just in a lot of the ways in which the trajectory of Hex has played out in terms of the price chart, in terms of these like significant numbers, in terms of doublings and significant dates and things of this nature. Like, numbers are really important to Richard, and it seems like not just in terms of like how much something is worth. Like, he sees significance in numbers.
Yeah, I mean, if he's wanting to spend his billions on buying Hex, and then the people who are ending up buying the Hex from him, who are selling him the Hex are, if they're going out and doing things maybe that make the world a better place, or that advertise, that market Hex because they're doing flashy things, they're doing Hex flexes and that sort of thing. I mean, either way, it seems to be a win to make that Hex more valuable and to promote his platform and his cause, and to get more people in. I think it's wild to imagine how valuable Hex can be, especially if people realize the people who are selling Hex now can knock it off for a little while. What would happen then, right?
I'm almost afraid to imagine. Almost.
The demand would far exceed the supply, and I'm not sure if Richard would pull back because he's timing things so perfectly that it's on some sort of master timetable, or if it would change his timetable. But it might change our lives more than his if we're waiting, for more doubles before we take the profits that we can take whenever we want.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in either case, it's a fun ride. I'm very, very happy to be on this ride.
Yes.
This magic carpet ride
Yes.
that we are currently on. And yeah, I'm really, just looking forward to seeing what this collection of people can do as well. That's actually what I'm most excited about. Is I think more and more people are kind of reaching that point where they're starting to really think through the fact that they either have significant wealth or they will very soon, and what is the best way to utilize that wealth? What is the impact that they want to make? How would they like to change things? And they're really exciting conversations to be able to be a part of. You know, it's
Oh, yeah.
that's the opportunity, you know, that I see.
I'd encourage people, if you want to use your riches for a good cause, you can buy a ticket to the Hex conference, and that will be worth it because it facilitates our community, and it will be a big marketing event. I have personally sacrificed because I purchased something to help promote Hex and to help promote the conference, and I don't think I would have bought this if I didn't really want it to go further than just right, because material possessions, that doesn't really do it for me. But the idea of getting more people to pay attention to Hex and for their lives to be changed is worth me selling a little bit, right? Because I tell people I have in between 1% to 3% of my bags liquid, and that you know, that that I'm not sure what to do with that. That, you know, I know that the price of Hex is going to keep going up, so why would I sell what I don't need? Well, the only reason would be to sacrifice for the Hex community, and so I'd encourage others to buy tickets to the Hex conference, because that is really going to be a cool event. I'm strategically releasing little bits of information every week so that people don't realize how great it's going to be all at once, and people can get tickets at the new address is HexTicket.com and HexConference.com. We simplified that if you already bought a fundraising ticket to be able to attend in person. From the PulseHex.com, that's the same thing. So it's all, there's an online conference and an in-person conference, and they're connected. We're putting on both of them, and the one in person, we've changed the name from PulseHex.com conference to Hex Conference to make it easier for people to find. I'll drop the link.
I love it. Too. Very exciting stuff.
Oh, it's pinned. Yeah, it's pinned on YouTube if people want to follow that link. So.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's going to be, oh my gosh, there's going to be workshops. There's going to be panels. There's going to be individual speakers. There's going to be streaming booths. So for all your favorite streamers, instead of having a bunch of corporations come in and do their exhibition hall booth,
I get it. Yeah.
It's going to be streamers, so you can meet your favorite streamers. Maybe they're streaming live at the time, or maybe they're just there to focus their attention on you. But you can go from booth to booth and meet everybody. And as a streamer, you can meet your fans and do it. Let your creativity take over, and maybe make some games for people. Interview people on certain questions, collaborate with others to do cross promotion, and really we want, and we're not going to be charged. That's going to be free. We're not funding the conference from charging people to have a booth if they're a streamer, because that's going to be one of many main attractions. And then of course the keynote speeches. It's so exciting. It's so exciting to put the schedule together.
This sounds action-packed. Yeah, 100% looking forward to seeing what's in store at the conference. And I'm, definitely got some plans in place to get myself over there as well. So I've started strategizing because as you can imagine, leaving Australia is not the easiest thing at the moment. But yeah, starting to kind of work through that. So I'm pretty damn excited to see what happens at the conference. And also just to finally meet everybody in person. I think like having been in Australia, it's really, really cool connecting via streams and getting to know the community like on Twitter and that whole thing. But I think it just makes a huge difference actually seeing people in person and actually being able to connect with people on that level. So I think that'll be a really cool reason to go as well. So I'm definitely very excited about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think everybody who's been to a Hex meetup, can testify to the magic that happens when we, all realize that we're not bots and we're real people. Get to experience all the vibes and the community because we are really all on an unbelievable adventure together. And there are some things that we're going to be able to relate with each other on that other people aren't going to understand, like the topic of Sun-Wells syndrome. Trying to explain that to somebody who isn't experiencing it sounds like really rude and weird, in my opinion.
People just, I think it's just not something that can really click for you until you go through. Until you can actually go through that experience. It's just so foreign to like everything that you're used to in your life, especially because the majority of people I know, they've got jobs and they think about making long-term plans and all of that sort of stuff. But the idea of like that being able to accelerate in just a matter of mere months is so outlandish and so unbelievable. Yeah, it almost sounds a bit like either delusional or a bit arrogant when you're speaking about it. So like it is really comforting, I think, on some level to know that there's like a group of people that just kind of get it and they're asking the same questions that you're asking and they're thinking through the same problems that you're thinking through as well. It's just really cool to have a group of people who understand that. And are along for the journey. I think that's really cool.
I mean, the idea that suddenly having a fortune could be a bad thing, could be negative.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds kind of crazy. It's hard for people to process, and yet, right here we are. And Hexicans, just like OG Bitcoiners, right, who were able to delay gratification naturally, I guess, right? Or maybe it's kind of unnatural to be able to delay gratification, but it's so, I mean, I've even experienced recently feeling like, things that I've bought, that they were trying to own me, right? That the things we own end up owning us. So I've been in a struggle with my computer for quite some time because I knew the value of crypto. I believed in it. Maybe I didn't know it yet as well as I know it now, but I have been producing all this amazing content, creating all these really cool thumbnails and enjoyable stuff. I've been doing it with a computer that's 5 or 6 years old. And I had no problem with that, with not having the best laptop because I wanted to save money and put it into crypto. And so I was living very frugally for 2 or 3 years, saving, putting money into crypto, not benefiting from the fiat system of creating debt and borrowing from my future self, right? I was paying my future self and maybe that wouldn't be worth as much because the price of things goes up and wages don't go up as fast and stuff. But then, I went to order this new computer that will really allow me to help, give people the content that they deserve and be next level professional about it. And it's like, there have been multiple days where I had to run around trying to get it delivered, and I think the example I gave yesterday was that it becomes so apparent, like the layers of complexity and gridlock that governments and the businesses and everybody benefits from. It's like, it's pretty shocking. And, I could have been making content to help people understand game theory or help people understand, psychology skills, or, I could have been doing a number of things other than, spending hours and hours going back and forth, like with delivery people who, kind of must really hate their jobs because they want it to be as hard as possible and it eats up time. And that's how I felt trapped, is like, you have to stay at your home and just wait, like for the cable guy to come and hook up your cable. And they say it could be between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And then it's like, it's not even in that window. And then it gets rescheduled, and it's like days and days of just waiting on alert, having to not live your life because, you're waiting to get access to this, or you're stuck in some sort of gridlock, right? How many examples do we have, even in the psychology field, right? I used to get into so much gridlock because of new paperwork coming along. All my coworkers quit. They got burnt out because they were there to help people, to teach psychology skills, and instead they ended up putting all their energy into learning new forms of paperwork that were less efficient.
I hate the forms. Like it drives me nuts. It's the same here. Like there's just constantly updates to like the types of forms that you've got to fill in, and that ends up taking up all of the time, and so nothing actually gets done productively to help anybody. So like, yeah, it's just so strange. Like I think when you look at the various systems that we operate in the world, whether it be financial system or education system, or even some of the business systems that are in place, like how much of it seems like it actually must have been designed in order to like drain your productivity, to drain your efficiency, to drain your energy. Like it's just such a ridiculous scenario. Like I was on like a Hex ladies chat yesterday. I just dropped in for a second, and some of the ladies were just talking about like taxes and like how in this particular situation, how ridiculous they now seem, because like basically, I mean, especially here where I am at the moment, like my taxes are like going to a group of people who keep us confined in our homes. Like it's the most unproductive use of capital that there could be, like really, when you think about it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like there's so many like situations like that, I think that arise when you kind of step back and you look at the big picture. But yeah, that just kind of became particularly obvious to me yesterday. I was like, oh my gosh, that's actually right. Like there's nothing getting done here, and everybody's is literally just staying inside. But my taxes seem to go up, if anything. Like, it's the most ridiculous thing.
It's completely ridiculous, so this is one of the frameworks that I've been using to make sense of the world in its current state, and to give hope to others about solutions that we can program in to our form of money, if we are a social network of people that create a crypto that's socially enforced to make the world a better place, and that can be programmed in a way that helps people and increases productivity and increases the value of human time, right? When people are able to have a longer health span, then they become more experienced problem solvers. What I see in the world today is that part of what benefits the mega elite is not having to compete, is creating gridlock. And the way to create gridlock is to either naturally or intentionally create a mismatch between the level of complexity that somebody has the tools to solve versus the amount of complexity that you put in front of them. So for example, if, in my practice, I was really interested in, making the clinic better, but, that wasn't my role and that wasn't welcome. And so I was just kind of operating almost like a private practice, totally crushing it, while all the things that I had figured out about motivating attendance in people who are court ordered, it wasn't being used with any other clinicians who were having the same problems I had. The clinic would have made more money if, we had been able to treat more people by having them show up, and the people would have gotten more help. I mean, it's a no-brainer to motivate people to attend treatment, especially if they're unmotivated, but that wasn't welcome. And so that could have burned me out, right? And eventually I did realize that, well, I can get on YouTube and tell people about Omega 369 and how to pump up their prefrontal cortex. And I can help thousands of people, maybe hundreds, take the advice versus only getting the message out to the select few of people. And then the government charging, and corporation, everything, charging the super high rate for group therapy, for individual sessions, and not helping as many people just get the information out. And but when we get a mismatch in at the level of complexity versus what somebody can solve, people get unmotivated, whether it's because they're under challenged or over challenged.
Yeah, and there is. I know there's a lot of research that's been done on that. Like, I think that there is some kind of sweet spot between sort of level of ability and level of complexity, and when you hit that pocket exactly, it is the flow experience. That's one way I've had it phrased to me. Like, when you can completely lose yourself in something, but there's enough challenge there that you're not bored, but not so much complexity that it's overwhelming and stressful. You essentially like end up in flow, and that's when you're kind of your most productive, you're most happy, you're most able to achieve goals, and there doesn't seem to be much room for that experience in many of the activities that we're kind of expected to take part in your average everyday job. So
and so if we really are moving into a world of abundance, then we'll be able to have people naturally matching themselves better to the level of complexity that they want, because they'll be able to choose what work they do, and technology will be able to pick up the rest. And I guess the people who aren't delaying gratification and creating value. So delaying gratification creates value because you're storing value for the future, and that storing value is kind of the definition of money, storing value over time. And that's what Hex does better than anything else. And so when we're, the other thing that we know is that when people are cooperating and happy and healthy, the productivity goes up, and then the cost of things in the future goes down if there aren't psychopaths reaping all the profits at the top. And so if we get a more, so gridlock is one way that people in power prevent competition, right?
Yes.
Because it takes more resources in order. So I know that this is a petty example of me like having 2 days where many hours were taken up waiting on a simple delivery, right? But that comes down to trust too. If we knew that somebody wouldn't steal it off my porch right away, then it could have been left there all along. If the delivery person was paid enough to like want to do their job, or found joy in delivering things to people, or there was a bot delivering stuff, because because somebody really found joy in programming that bot to like not be a Terminator and just be delivery bot, right?
Delivery Terminator would be like the
sad.
scariest thing ever.
I know,
Like
right?
a bot that shows up to destroy you. Yeah.
Sign for the package or be destroyed. You know?
Or die. Yeah.
So as a business, you know, if I wanted to really match somebody up with a terrible job, I could pay somebody to have a storefront and just, you know, receive packages, right? Like that's the job of a lot of people, right? If they're an administrative assistant or something. And so, so there's so many benefits, I think, to really people who are already empowered to create gridlock. There's much better examples I know, but that's one that that's come to mind recently. That it just seems silly how you know, every tiny step of the way, like I couldn't even call the local delivery place because they want to route it through corporate, and they want me to talk to a robot that can be programmed to intentionally misunderstand what I'm saying, to slow me down, right? So they don't have to hire as many people. And but it's not meant to make the process easier. It's meant to make the process harder, to punish people for calling and asking for support, to punish people for, you know, whatever, I guess, trying to come up in life and trying to compete with other people who already have great computers or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, there's something really just counterproductive about the system as it stands at the moment. Like I've seen different studies and different estimates on this along the way, but I mean, I think the upshot is that this particular study I'm thinking of found that like the majority of jobs in corporations are actually non-productive. They're just there to create. They're just there to create a job. So there's all of this like unnecessary work that's created because people think that the solution is, well, we just need to create jobs, and it just ends up creating a lot of scenarios that you're talking about where, you know, the customer's having this, you know, terrible experience. The worker is bored out of their mind, and they know deep down that there's nothing meaningful in what they're doing. They're just there to like collect money. And then you have these kind of parasitic type organizations that are like collecting from this very like non-productive state. And, you know, it just kind of snowballs, and it does seem to be like kind of across the board at the moment. I know I feel as though I've had, you know, a lot of similar experiences to the one that you're mentioning there, where stuff's just not really it's just not well thought out, and it's just detracting from like my ability to do anything productive. And it does just seem like that's actually just the goal in a lot of cases.
Yeah,
chaos is the goal.
So Peter Thiel, you know, wrote 0 to 1, and he is a venture capitalist that's extremely successful, who has a famous speech arguing that competition is for losers, that you should pretend to be competitive so that you don't get shut down by regulators, but that you should actually have a monopoly in everything you do. Otherwise, it's not as profitable. And that sure is what we see is these downstream effects of non-competition. So that's problematic, and it's, I think, endemic of the problems that we have at the base layer of money. And so it really gives me a lot of hope to see that you know, that Hex being the type of crypto that possibly could be a surprise to the entire crypto space, the entire world. Surprise! Here's something where you can enjoy the abundance of the world. You can pay your future self with real programmable decentralized money, right? People can go to 3gcrypto.com and read the article I wrote about how in the future you'll be able to pay yourself to make positive behavior changes. You'll be able to decide your level of motivation by basically, where did the ETH go, except with paying yourself. So you'll be able to recycle funds to keep yourself motivated and you won't have to be in a scarcity mindset. So your IQ goes up when you're not in survival mode. Your agreeableness goes up. I'm sure your your ability to solve problems goes up.
Yeah.
And when you have time and resources to solve your problems and you're not in survival mode, well, then you're in creator mode. Then you're in God mode, right? And so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is why Hex, I think, gives a lot of us so much hope. Like, it does seem to be that challenge to the system, that challenge to this like chaotic, unproductive, parasitic, habitual kind of way of interacting that seems to have arisen in sort of the mainstream system. And it is that like unexpected evolution of finance. It's just this thing that it confuses people when they first see it, because like their first instinct is this can't be possible, or this is a scam, or this is just completely unreasonable to consider. And so in a lot of ways it's a surprise, because when you first see it, it might not seem that deep, because you're just thinking, oh, okay, I can maybe make a lot of money really quickly here. But as you go into the system and as you start to educate yourself about it and you start to understand it, you understand there's so many like layers to it, and that there is this system here that is designed for wealth accumulation and long-term passive income. And it's put together so intelligently that it's a surprise. It's something that you're not expecting when you first come across it. So yeah, I love
think
this
that,
element of surprise.
Yeah, I think that there will be, at least 69 Easter eggs, right? Or 369 or 14 Easter eggs in Hex. Only those numbers, perhaps. And that we'll keep getting surprised. I think there's many, many ways that we could be surprised to the upside. People are being surprised to the downside. People are used to living in an unhealthy monetary environment where literally people go after each other. They bicker. There's so much anger and depression and behaviors that are caused by the gridlock itself, that are caused by the financial stress. And if the old way of thinking is we need people to barely be able to pay for what they want in order to motivate them to do work, that is not keeping people in a low prefrontal cortex state. That is not the way to create abundance in the world. And we're starting to see abundance even with the opposite of what is going to work best. And so if we have a new system, Richard has talked several times about what if people just didn't get old and die. The greatest minds, what if people, if they were able to keep solving problems, like Albert Einstein, for example. And, I think we see if there is no deterioration, right, if we're able to solve some of these biological decay problems, which may be in our reach now, especially if we have unprecedented cooperation between, all the people on Earth, because that's what allows Hex to go to $1 million and pay for itself. That everybody in the world can have $1 million at today's prices or more, is because you're going to have other people who are lacking of value for longer. It's going to be a competition to push value into the future. And then also to only cause investment to go into something if either it's a sacrifice or you're just burning it up, and then that value you can never have back again so easily to put into things to gratify yourself instantly. And then, the investment that does happen is so valuable, or it's so altruistic that, then we're just living off of 15x global GDP but pushing that further and further into the future as technology will continue to accelerate exponentially. It's just a much better system than borrowing from our future selves. It's paying our future selves.
Yeah.
And being around longer to solve problems and be experienced at it, right?
Yeah. And like, I mean, I think so much of this is like the scarcity short-term mindset versus the abundance long-term mindset. And I don't know how we're going for time, because like definitely one of these like messages that I received this week, I think is really illustrative of this like short-term scarcity mindset in some of the like objections that were coming up for Hex. So
let's analyze it.
Yeah. Let's do it. So the first sentence was, I think we need to be honest. We are here for the pump, trying to make some quick cash. Okay, so already I've got a lot of alarm bells going off because this person, I think, seems to be under the impression that, like, to me, what's implied by that sentence is that there couldn't be a positive long-term financial system that could take care of you with passive income and wealth accumulation. And so therefore what we should do is just simply try to grab as much cash as we can right now in the short term, because this is the experience that I've already had of the world. I don't know. What do you think of this attitude of just, wanting to be here for the pump and make some quick cash?
I empathize with it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what people's experience has taught them. Thank goodness they may be exposed to an environment that can teach them something different.
I agree. And
we'll incentivize them one way or another, right? Because people, once they've paid attention, right, and once they keep hearing more and more, right, people are seeing hexagons randomly scattered throughout nature and man-made objects, but people have not yet seen Hex on the news. People have not yet seen Hex driving around the country doing a road tour, having a conference that gets tons of attention on it, having Hex flexes everywhere. That's where we're headed.
Yeah.
And they'll buy back in and they'll still do extremely well.
Yeah. So the next sentence is even more worrying, Maddie. I don't think anybody cares if Hex is here in 15 years if they have made and capitalized on some mad bank. I've got a lot of thoughts and feelings about that. I mean, I guess the first thing is that I've seen all of the evidence I've seen is completely the contrary. I'd say that people are deeply passionate about Hex, want to see it be successful, not just for 15 years, but for the next 100 years. People are already, I know, like yourself, Maddie, talking about 30, trying to figure out a way to make a 30-year stake, or at least to automatically roll over a 15-year stake.
Yes.
And so everything that I know about the community, everything I know about the way that Hex is designed is the opposite of that idea. Any thoughts coming up for you?
Yeah, totally. So what does the evidence show us? The evidence shows us that people are staking longer than ever, and they're staking more for longer periods of time. And that's pretty cool. I think that we can point to Bitcoin and see that people didn't time lock and they did worse so far, especially taking yearly prices, taking a snapshot every year. People have missed out on millions of X's, not just millions of dollars, millions of X's. Every $1 they put into Bitcoin would have been $5 million more dollars if you sold it a penny. So so this experiment's already been run, and Richard is the example, who is somebody who delayed gratification the best, and now he gets to write the rules, and his rules appear to be altruistic. They appear to be I'm calling it the benevolent bot, not the stalker bot, but the benevolent bot has a better ring to it somehow. And, you know, and so I would also say, I feel like garbage when I send money to my future self. And so, sure, delaying gratification is painful. And so that's okay. But even if we send small amounts of money to our future self, then we get the experience, then we know what we're talking about. And then we might be surprised. We might be surprising ourselves to the upside and not just, you know, and then we're force multiplying the surprises on top of each other. And that's probably the most powerful thing, right? If we all knew how scarce would be, how scarce Hex would be, if we knew what we know now, I think many of us would have staked longer, would have used a different strategy, would have lived more frugally, right?
Yeah, 100% get you. I think, like you're saying, all of the stats suggest that many people care about Hex being here in 15 years, and more than care, they're actually very certain about the level of success that that Hex will have. And this is obvious from the average length stake, from the amount of dollars that are currently locked up in those stakes. Yes, there is a very passionate community who cares very much, and is very
and the people locking in value means that they will be around and that they will care. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And this is something that I've tried to put into words, and you know, I don't think have communicated to people more broadly or as effectively as I would like to, this idea that we are creating the future. Because let's say that there was some bug in Hex, which I don't think that there is. And let's say that Hex went to zero. You've got a network of 65,000 people who are incentivized, you know, for quite some time to come to fix the system. And we would. We've already seen that happen with Pulse Chain being the fix to Ethereum fees being adversarial is the real truth behind that, I think. And it's not just that the blockchain is filled up, and that people are valuing short-term projects versus, I mean, how contradictory is it that Ethereum says that code is law and they want to make something immutable, and then the first product that comes along, Hex, that has such great potential to be launched as a finished product, and they go and give priority to things that change versus something that doesn't change. And how can you build a system? How can you build on a stack that says that it doesn't want things to change, but then changes things? That creates a negative externality that I think Richard always knew could exist. And, you know, now we're a victim of our own success, and we're just going to keep winning. That's the reality here. And, you know, the more I put the pieces together, you know, if Richard controls the majority of crypto in the world and got lots of different coins, I mean, what if he bought all the coins that he turned into USDC from himself, and then he really controls all that liquidity for all the coins that were donated, still, while we think that he doesn't, and then he can create direct bridges for everything and just suck all the value off of Ethereum. Because which one are you going to trade on? Something where the price is higher and it works better, or something where the price is lower and it works slower? Yeah, it's great so beautiful. It's giving people a free copy and being the market maker and being benevolent. It's going to teach a lot of people. it's going to make a lot of people rich. Yeah.
It absolutely will. Yeah, all awesome points. And like probably the other thing I'd say about this sentence, so the end of it was if they have capitalized and made some mad bank. So I'll just answer that with a question. So when you say capitalize, what do you mean? When you say mad bank, what do you mean? Because if you were to sell Hex, where would you put that money?
Sell for what?
Exactly. Sell for what? You're just going to put it back into your bank and be a victim of inflation and money printing gone completely crazy. You're going to put it into stocks. You're going to put it into property. I mean, I've got nothing against either of those asset classes, but there's literally nothing that could touch the performance of cryptocurrency as a whole and Hex specifically. So I think that's just a question to ask yourself. What do you mean by capitalizing? And where would these profits go?
Yeah, because those are you'd be selling for things that are manipulated to steal from you instead of manipulated to enrich you.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. So the next sentence is, we need to stop looking at the Hex price and look at the market cap. Oh, okay. If Hex hits $1, its market cap is 173 billion. Which, is that correct? I'm not even entirely sure that's correct.
No, it'd be higher.
It'd be higher. Putting it third overall amongst actual cryptocurrencies. No, that would put it second, right?
It depends on what your total circulating supply is, and there's discrepancies between the different coin ranking sites. But if we're using nomics, which we like because they are not in an ethic, like, they're not in a conflict of interest, being a site that provides data and benefits from people trading on centralized exchanges. We see that Hex currently is number 3. Mm-hmm. Currently is 264 billion, and so if it doubles from here 46 cents, it's going to be way more than Ethereum. It's going to be, because Ethereum's 384. So
yes, and so his objection appears to come in the next sentence. Ethereum, we'll just gloss over the market cap issue for now, but Ethereum, which powers Hex and numerous other tokens, is worth like 400 billion for perspective. Does Hex even do half of what Ethereum does to justify that price is the question? Yeah. So basically, he's saying that to him, there's no justification for Hex having either a higher or equal market cap to Ethereum because it doesn't do half as much as what Ethereum does. What are your thoughts about that?
Price cares about people buying and not selling. And if you have the richest man in the world buying Hex like there's no tomorrow, then that's what matters. It's not and that same person has control of the Ethereum price and they can dump it. That's called, that's a game. That's a whale game, and whale games don't operate based on the rules of people who aren't whales. You have to be a whale to write the rules about what the price of anything does. Do you not? You have to be a market maker. Prices are determined by liquidity providers across all markets, whether it's the stock market. The reason why the Apple price doesn't go swing up and down much more wildly than it does is because there are investment banks that provide liquidity and get to read your orders before they come in and make up their own prices for everything. That's how prices are determined. And I don't fault anybody for not appreciating that, because even economists, even financial advisors do not in general understand their field to the point where they can enrich themselves and not have to take your fees, right? And so the world will learn, and I've said this, I'm going to say it again, the world will learn with Pulse Chain where price and value come from.
Yeah.
We'll learn about what liquidity pools do and how all these things are related. It's going to be super clear to you very soon.
Very soon. And I think also we are learning very quickly that market cap is a terrible metric with which to measure the value, the actual value that an asset has to somebody or a group of people who are holding it. We know that there are things that are far more important, i.e. price, and how quickly that price rises to the actual impact on someone's life, because the rest of it just doesn't matter. And as Richard always says, you can't trade market cap. It makes it legitimately makes no difference to the impact that asset will have. It's just there because it's a habit and a norm that people have gotten into for valuing and ranking certain assets, and it just doesn't really make sense in the crypto space. But aside from that, I'd like to also just head on address the fact that he seems to be implying that Hex as an asset is less valuable intrinsically than Ethereum because Ethereum powers other things. And from my point of view, an asset that is the greatest store of value that has ever existed on the planet, the only thing that I've seen that can actually help people to beat the perils of inflation, and not only just beat them, but turn the tables on it to the point where they can create life-changing wealth and then use that wealth in an intelligent and well thought out way to change the world, is far more valuable than anything that Ethereum has ever done. And I just think that that this particular point perhaps needs to be thought through a little bit more than what's evident on the message here.
Part of the reason that Ethereum is being held hostage against its will and the will of its developers by the miners who provide security racket is right because of what Dev Kyle pointed out, that Ethereum is trying to be two incompatible things at the same time. Ethereum is trying to be a store of value and a computer network, and you can't have both. And those are two things that are opposed to each other, and that's what part of the reason why the value will be usurped, and in this case, it will be transferred from people who got it wrong to people who got it right.
100%. All right, so I think there are a couple of other points. He's asking about, do we know how much Hex is locked and the average locking horizon? We've already covered that. We know exactly how much is locked, and we know that the average stake length is 5.74 years, and that is growing over time. I'm glad you're having fun, by the way, Maddie.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, our favorite point. Okay, so sure, there are mechanics that aid the price rise, locking up Hex to create a deflationary token. But for the price to go up, more and more people have to be buying Hex and ideally locking them up. Since it's dependent on new people jumping onto Hex for the price to rise, it is the definition of a Ponzi, as there is no value here apart from the artificially inflated growth metrics. Thoughts? Shall I let you take the Ponzi point?
I mean, gosh, the Ponzi point is probably the hardest because people don't even understand what they're asking.
Exactly.
So like I would first like reverse and say like, all right, explain to me how the housing market is not a Ponzi, how the automobile market is not a Ponzi, how you can somehow have a value coming intrinsically when that's not what money is. Money is not having something intrinsic. It's through the exchange of goods and services that people are making decisions. People are being adaptive. They're creating price signals that are valuable because of supply and demand, because central planning doesn't work, socialism doesn't work, right? And so if we're talking about what is a Ponzi, so Ponzi is, that's where you're paying you're paying later investors from early investors, or you're paying early investors from later investors, but you're lying about where the profits are coming from. It's an unprofitable thing. And so really you're just creating a latency and capitalizing off of the adoption curve and people not having all the information. In this case, we do have all the information about what Hex is, where the profit comes from. And the profit, just like in any other market, is determined by the amount of people buying and not selling. And so if everybody sold, the housing market would go to zero. If everybody sold anything, the market would go to zero. But that's not probable in certain assets that are, that have a use case, that have good product market fit, that in this case, resemble money better than, so our fake money is better than the government's fake money, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. So yeah, just definitely to build on those points, just to kind of sum up. So the first one is that if people, if something is a Ponzi simply because more people have to buy it for the price to go up, then literally everything is a Ponzi. There's no asset that doesn't work like that. If you buy a share, shares are or a stock, they're the greater fool theory essentially, because you have to sell at a higher price, and for that to happen, someone has to buy it at a higher price than what you bought it for. So exactly like you said, explain to me how anything is not a Ponzi with that definition. And secondly, essentially, this person has defined what a Ponzi is completely incorrectly, because for Hex to be a Ponzi, it would need to be paying later adopters their interest. No, it'd have to be paying early adopters their interest via the funds that come in from later adopters. And that is 100% not what it's doing. So by definition, it's just not a Ponzi. So that cannot be correct.
Yeah, and going back to the sell for what too, right? So if people are selling, then if people are valuing their wealth in USD, then the system does need people to facilitate those transactions. But if you're valuing your wealth in Hex, then the system can pay out exactly what it promises to, and it doesn't need any new people in the system in order to create value by allowing you to create a savings plan and to, that's what the definition of investing is buying something that you see has good product market fit, that it might be more valuable in the future. And part of the reason Hex is more valuable in the future is because you get more of it, and because it's the people who get more are the people who are locking it up in a continuous game that keeps being played. And so in the end, it's sorting people out on wealth based on their delaying gratification. And so it's changing people's mindsets and changing their behavior for sure.
Yeah, and probably, the final question I'd probably ask him is, have you noticed how every asset class, how the prices only seem to go up? And have you have you maybe considered why that might be? So maybe just prompt a little bit of questioning on that.
Yeah, well,
why
because
do property
it's
prices only go up? Why do share prices only go up? Why do, I mean, even collectibles and Rolexes and like luxury items pretty much only go up.
because
Why is that?
they're denominated in dollars, and the dollars are becoming less scarce.
Absolutely. And there's even kind of you could almost make the argument that the stock market embodies a Ponzi scheme perhaps more closely than Hex does, because at least in recent times, with all of these stimulus checks and the money printing, basically what they're doing is they're inflating that supply. Some of that supply is going out to people in the form of stimulus checks, and then people are buying stocks with those stimulus checks and raising the prices. And so in like a weird way, the stock market itself is kind of being fueled by the inflation of the money supply. And so there's like a worrying mechanic there at play that one could launch the accusation of Ponzi at if they really needed to.
Yeah. I mean, a less sophisticated version of Hex is what we see in, let's say, the housing market, where by force and gridlock, you decrease the liquidity. So if if all the lenders get together and decide to take their time issuing loans, then the housing market stores value for longer, right? If you add an extra 3 weeks to people closing their deals, then people can't flip houses as quickly, and you're decreasing the velocity of money, which is one thing that gives money value, is by people buying and not selling as quickly, the time locking. So that's another great example of, that's why we know Hex works, is because we've seen these games before and they've never been so sophisticated.
Absolutely. Okay. So the next part of it I find is a sort of an interesting argument that he's making here. So he says many cryptos fit this same goal with thinly veiled use cases to try and not be labeled as a Ponzi. And then he goes on to say, is an unregulated Ponzi a bad thing? No, not if you get in early enough, which it looks like people in Hex have, but with things like this, they can disappear as fast as they can come about. I mean, I would definitely have to say that an unregulated Ponzi is a terrible thing. It's awful. It's completely unethical, and you're stealing people's money on purpose. That should absolutely 100% be shut down. Yeah, that's pretty much my reaction there. I guess, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's the majority of crypto assets, crypto jobs, are people convincing others that they've got some fancy math thing, that they have an arbitrage bot, or they have some competitive advantage that is so complex that nobody can check it, and it's verifiably complex. But is it real? Well, it's real until Richard Hart comes along and eats your lunch. And so people who are selling this idea that they have a way to make money in crypto based on trading really don't understand what crypto is, what money is, because they're using middlemen, they're paying fees, they're getting people wrecked, right? And that is the game theory of crypto in general, says exactly what is happening, that the most profitable activity is going to be making promises and then not delivering on them. That is the most profitable activity, is to have the most amount of promises and the least amount of delivery, because delivery is expensive and it hurts your dream sales, right? If people can actually use the thing, then it's always, buy the news, or buy the rumor, sell the news. It's always, you want to speculate on the future value. But then when the value actually shows up, then you need to already be on to the next promise coin. And that's, again, it's a form of borrowing from your future self. But in this case, it's somebody else borrowing from, from something that doesn't exist yet. And that's the wrong incentive structure. That's not how great things get built. Great things get built because people have breakthroughs, because there are altruistic actors, because there are good actors in the space, because, for all the reasons we see in Hex. So.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Well, I think that takes care of most of the points here. And hopefully takes care of some of these objections. And maybe just provokes a couple of question marks.
Yeah, we can call this defending the faith.
Yeah, that's it. 100%. Yeah, I guess it's
awesome.
Just fun to like examine the way people are thinking as well, and also like why they're thinking the way they're thinking. And like I said, like this isn't to be critical of this person. I actually like I know this person really really like him, but I think in this particular area, it feels as though it's coming from kind of a scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's just not possible to believe that people are thinking this way. They're thinking about investing something for the long term and making long-term positive change in the world as well. And so that's where, when you're coming from that place, a lot of errors start to creep into your thinking, and you can come to conclusions that aren't really very beneficial to yourself and perhaps the people around you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's good.
That's a great summary, and I think that I mean, we've really elucidated a lot, I think, through our discussion today. It's been really enjoyable. I know I'm short on time here, and we've been going back and forth for over 2.5 hours creating great content for this month, and I'm really looking forward to the next time we can stream together and continue to see what surprises may be in store.
Looking forward to it, Maddie.
Awesome. Well, thanks to everybody in the audience. Hit the like and subscribe button. Go to HexTicket.com for your conference ticket, and we will see you next time. Stake wisely, my friends.